He's founder and CEO of a major independent planning brand. He's here to join us at the PSAV Inspiration Cafe. Please welcome my guest, Charles Massey, founder and CEO of Synaxis Meetings and Events. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I have heard you refer to the dawning of the independence and the dawning of the day of the independence. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to correct, we've been called independent planners for so many years, and a few years ago, a number of us started talking and said, doesn't the term meeting management firm, or if you're a single individual shop, meeting management consultant sound better? So that's where I think the direction we're moving. So as far as the dawning of the independent, or as I say, meeting management firm, really as economic times change, and I will qualify it by saying this isn't the first time this has cycled through. Many times, for example, if a corporate meeting planner that was employed by a corporation or an association meeting planner would be laid off during tough economic times, they would become an independent, retaining their former employer as their first client, if you will. From there, it would go into where somebody else say, oh, I hear you're on your own now, can you help me with my annual meeting? And the point to that is the dawning of the independent. The independents are now really having so much, because of the economic change, diversity in their clientele. For example, our company works with associations, corporate, many of corporate, which still has the meeting planning department, but they're doing more with less. There might be less people working in the department, but the same number, if not more, meetings still need to be planned. So the dawning of the independent really is the independents are developing more opportunities, if you will, for business and for planning meetings than we had before because of the economic changes.
And are there unique issues that you have to confront as an independent planner? In other words, you're not of the company, so
Correct.
You have to quickly adapt to whatever the theme of the company is, the
Correct.
mood and the tone. Are those problems that you have to?
With a new client, there's always learning of the corporate culture, because each corporate has their own culture, each association has their own individual culture as well. And many times the learning curve is quicker than others, depending on how deeply entrenched the culture is. An example would be probably more in corporate. Many corporate, their focus can be very different than an association, for example, where it's a bringing together of people for a common cause. A corporate meeting, people are generally there because they're there as a command performance. They're told they need to be there for the annual sales meeting. They're told they need to be there for the product launch. And that's one, and also our goal being to make every client feel like they're our only client, because in many cases we are their meeting planning department. And that's a bit of a juggling act, but we tend to balance it pretty well by having a very diverse team.
Have you noticed any differences in the way companies, particularly companies, maybe associations, look toward meetings, the role of the meeting in the company's marketing toolkit? Have you seen any changes there, or basically meetings still what they used to be?
Well, a meeting is still a gathering together of people for a common purpose, but some of the changes have been involved with the hybrid meetings. For example, what we did here earlier this morning and what PCMA did in the general session with one of the speakers being piped in virtually, if you will. A lot of that is happening now. So there are the technological and the event technology changes that go along with that.
Are there two or three things you see happening in the industry beyond technology that meeting planners like yourself has to be aware of? In terms of interest from the audience, changes in audience structure, any trends?
Well, again, catering to the virtual audience that's not actually physically attending the meeting has created a lot more opportunities. I never say problems, I say opportunities. Sure. And you have to make sure, first of all, that the technology is working, that there's a backup, and in many cases, depending on the level of the meeting, there's a backup for the backup. That's one example that I can think of.
Right. And as you look to where meetings are heading, particularly since I know Synaxis has a global footprint to some degree. You have
Correct.
Partnerships and
we do.
Companies.
Yes.
Are there any changes happening overseas that we can look for happening here that are heading our way in terms of trends? Or?
What's interesting that I've noticed that because of technology, the world is smaller, so the trends that start to happen technologically, I think specifically is what we're talking about, right? Technologically, they happen simultaneously. Because, for example, our sister company in Australia, we communicate via Skype when we have a staff meeting. Our sister company in the UK, the same thing. And so the technological time lags are not what they once were because the world has gotten much smaller because of technology.
When you look back, what is it you would have told yourself when you start? What do you know now that you didn't know when you get into this business at the beginning?
Oh God, that's a loaded question.
That's a whole other show, huh?
That's a whole other show. But you know what I think it was the partnership aspect. I think I knew because I was an association volunteer from way back. I knew that partnerships were key, but to the extent that I would be developing my business model based on partnerships with other organizations so that in the grander scheme of things could be considered competitors. And really now we look at one another as co-opetition.
It seems, from my perspective, that the industry has a lot of that partnership
Very
sharing,
much so.
word of mouth, referrals, and that's how you all communicate. Is that true from your perspective?
Oh, very much so. And even more so, I find, although we do, again, have a presence in Australasia and in Europe, but even more so in North America, there tends to be a lot of this partnerships because everyone, it's a level of trust that most of the folks we work with are folks that we have volunteered with on various association boards and committees. So there's a level of trust there.
So as a young planner, what you've learned is you can rely on other planners for good information and for assistance.
Absolutely.
Terrific.
Yeah, we couldn't do our job without that model.